This is session number 7 of Restoration Works, and we're calling it Confidence and Peace. This fifth dimension is a place of authority. It's a place where people in history have walked with God like no other human beings. Moses, for example, went up into the mountain and God gave him the 10 Commandments. He was able to guide them through the wilderness, and Moses had the patience to work with those people. Or John, the beloved, who was banished to an isle called Patmos, was able to be in the Spirit, and God was able to show him heaven and the future. And he learned about love, which he wrote about in his epistles. This is a place where people are so restored and so whole that they're able to have Garden of Eden type relationships with God, just walking and talking with him in the cool of the day. Not very many people make it to this level, though, because it's very difficult to be this committed and this whole and this restored, to give yourself so wholly to God. It's a place that requires a lot of faith, and it's very unfamiliar territory. I asked my wife to dig this out of our mementos. It's a little model of the space shuttle. My son used to play with it. He used to dream of being a part of the NASA team. I used to dream that way too. Think about how neat it would be to fly a small group of people that were willing to go to dimensions other people were not willing to go to. That's what I'm talking about when we talk about going to this new dimension, this fifth dimension of confidence and peace. There was one human being that went to a dimension no one else had ever gone to. His name was Charles Elwood Yeager. He was born in Myra, West Virginia. He enlisted in the Army Air Force after high school in 1941, and he served as a flight officer during World War II. He was commissioned as a reserve flight officer in 1943, and he became a pilot in the fighter command of the 8th Air Force, which was stationed in England. He flew 64 missions over Europe and he shot down 13 German aircraft. But Yeager's courage was put to the test when his own plane was shot down during a mission over Germany. With the aid of the French underground, he escaped the capture and returned to his unit. And after the war, he became a flight instructor and a test pilot, securing a regular commission as the captain in 1947. What I'm saying, he was a faithful and competent soldier. Yeager was chosen from several volunteers, to test fly the secret experimental X-1 aircraft that was built by the Bell Aircraft Company. The Bell X-1 was designed to test the capabilities of a human pilot and fixed-wing aircraft against the severe aerodynamic stresses of flight near the speed of sound, and to determine if a straight-wing plane could fly faster than the speed of sound. That's about 760 miles an hour at sea level. And no one knew whether a pilot could successfully control a plane under the battering effects of the shock waves that were produced as the plane neared that speed, which is called Mach 1. But on October 14th, 1947, over Rogers Lake in California, Yeager rode that X-1 attached to the belly of a B-29 bomber to an altitude of 25,000 feet. He was then released by the B-29, and he rocketed to an altitude of 40,000 feet. He told those that were with him that this would be the day, and he flew increasingly faster. The plane, when it got near Mach 1, shook violently, and it felt like it would come apart. And then he broke the sound barrier. Yeager became the first person to ever go faster than the speed of sound. And he took that X-1 to a speed of 662 miles an hour, faster than the speed of sound at that altitude. 8 months later, in 1948, the Air Force announced that record to the public. Yeager continued to make more test flights for the Air Force. And on December 12, 1953, in an X-1, a rocket plane, he would set a world speed record of 1,650 miles an hour. Now, astronauts fly at 18,000 miles per hour, which is Mach 35, and it feels perfectly smooth. God is looking for some people who are faithful, who are competent, who are even-headed, and who are obedient. They're ready to spend time with Him, and then they're ready to step out in faith where no one else has ever gone before. I'm wondering, are you one of those people? Let's pause and talk to God about this. So, the fifth dimension is a place of confidence and of peace. The fourth dimension is a place of motion, of confusion, of uncertainty. But the fifth dimension is a place of even keel and of confidence and of peace. There's tranquility that's there. Not tranquility just because your brothers and sisters or your kids are gone for the night, but a deep, settled peace. Not just an absence of war or an absence of turmoil in your life, but this blessed assurance. We get little tastes of this from time to time in some prayer meetings or services. Now, if we're in this dimension, we can see the end from the beginning. Revelation 1 and 8 says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning, the ending, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. Knowing that, we can live there with Him above all of our problems. This Alpha and Omega is mentioned 4 times in the book of Revelation. This is a place where we're beyond knowledge, beyond the facts. This is where we know something in our spirit even though we don't see it in reality. We now operate beyond time and space, you could say. Now, the here and now no longer runs us or worries us or limits us. We're still human beings, and we still act like human beings, but we operate on higher principles. It's the place where a promise is given, and we just live in that promise. We no longer worry about how it's going to turn out because we have a promise. We can do what Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 7 tell us to do in the Living Bible. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs, and don't forget to thank Him for His answers. Verse 7, which is not on your screen, says, if you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than any human mind can understand. His peace will keep your thoughts and your hearts quiet and at rest as you trust in Jesus Christ. Jesus said in John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. This is the level of prophecy. This is where we see God's plan. This is where Daniel was at when God told him about the appointed times. This is a place where we know God's in charge, even though it hasn't happened yet, or even though we don't see how it can happen. Romans refers to, for example, the fullness of the Gentiles that's going to come at one time. We're told that when Jesus came to Calvary, he couldn't be arrested until the time had come, the appointed time. Pentecost was said to have happened at the appointed time. This dimension is when we're able to let God talk to us about His appointed time, and even though it hasn't happened yet, we can be confident that it's going to happen. Let's look at a few analogies that might help you put your mind around this concept. We'll go back through these dimensions that we talked about. Let's take the example of a parade. In the first dimension, it'd be like someone was looking through a hole in the fence and all they saw was a flute. The second dimension, they get a little closer and they can see a little bit more. They see the flute being played by the flutist. The third dimension would be as if they stepped around the fence and they saw all of the players in the band. The fourth dimension watches the parade as it goes by. They see the whole parade go by in motion. And the fifth dimension would be like you're in a helicopter looking down and you see the beginning and the end all at the same time. Or take the analogy of an orchestra. The first dimension, the player who's playing the violin is just playing for the feel of it. In the second dimension, they're playing for the fellowship with other players. In the third dimension, they're playing with the whole orchestra as a whole team. In the fourth dimension, they're playing for the music's sake. And in the fifth dimension, they see the whole score, everybody's scores together like the conductor sees. Or one more illustration, that of construction. The first dimension would be like just seeing a hammer. The second dimension would be seeing the workman using the hammer. The third dimension would be to see the whole scene of what's happening on the construction site. The fourth dimension would be seeing the men in action doing their thing. But the fifth dimension is where you see the work site, and you know what's about to happen. Let's talk about this fifth dimension and how it affects our prayer life. Tucked away on the world-famous Massachusetts Institute of Technology campus in Boston is a potentially shocking scene to the unsuspecting tourists. It's intriguing to some and disturbing to others. A former university president called it a disaster, but many people would call the creation of the award-winning architect Frank Gehry a delight. They're looking at a 720,000 square foot Ray and Maria Stata Center located at 32 Vassar Street. It's used primarily by the electrical engineering and computer science departments of that prestigious school. Now, the building was obviously designed to turn heads and to make a statement. According to Wikipedia, architecture critic Robert Campbell praised Gehry for, quote, breaking up the monotony of a street of concrete buildings and being a building like no other building. When that building opened in 2004, Campbell wrote this: "The Stata is always going to look unfinished. It also looks as if it's about to collapse. Columns tilt at scary angles, walls teeter, swerve, and collide in random curves and angles. Materials change wherever you look: brick, mirror surface steel, brushed aluminum, brightly colored paint, corrugated metal. Everything looks improvised, as if thrown up at the last moment. That's the point. The Stata's appearance is a metaphor for the freedom, daring, and creativity of the research that's supposed to occur inside." Now, whether this Stata Center impresses or unsettles those who drive by it, it certainly reminds everyone that buildings don't have to look the same in order to work. And it also underscores how the variety and the quirkiness and non-traditional ideas can converge on a blueprint and then emerge in a structure that can't be ignored. Projects like this one highlight one of mankind's greatest attributes, creativity. God created everything, and then He made man in His own image. And as a result, we've been given this wonderful gift called creativity. And while creativity has produced many terrible things, those who allow God to influence their creativity have the potential to impact the world and make it a better place for everyone. Everybody benefits, and the person that God uses experiences purpose and meaning that's not found in just an ordinary existence. But believers should beware, because God-inspired people may not always fit the status quo. The idea of a God-inspired life is that someone allows God to be the architect and help them make their peace with their destiny that He offers, and then enjoy the creative journey called life under His direction. Not everybody understands or approves of projects that come out of such a union. God, when He lived in a body, Jesus Christ became Exhibit A of this. God invites you and I into a drawing room. He shares His plans with us. He shares His dreams with us so that we can have the privilege of participating in the fulfillment of those plans. Romans 4:17, in the Amplified, says this. God says, "Who gives life to the dead and speaks of the non-existent things that He has foretold and promised as if they already existed?" God is the ultimate architect, and we have yet to see all that He's planned. But I want to be part of it. And I'm confident that whatever He does will be unique and intriguing. And what if we could see the plans that God has for us? This is a dimension we're talking about where true genius is found. It's a place of fellowship with God where God is inspiring ideas. In the fourth dimension, we engage in spiritual warfare. In the fifth dimension, we see the will of God revealed. We don't feel peace because we know the future, again, but we feel peace because we have confidence and faith in Almighty God. One more quote from Brother Sanzo at this point. He says, "All the formulas of the operation of faith and the working of the miraculous are found here in the fifth dimension. The enemy cannot stop us here. This is where we find spiritual dominion. Here there is no longer a rising up against us. There is no argument against the completed plan. You cannot change it. Everything has already been determined." Let's close by praying that God would help us to be restored to a place of peace and confidence.